Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Monday, December 13th, and another turbulent weekend for crypto. We got a little bit of false hope, but today that's being snatched right away as the markets continue to, move down. Bitcoin retesting that 47.5K level. We'll talk about that as well as, the rest of the altcoin market also getting hit pretty hard. Before we dive into that, CJ, John, how are you gentlemen doing on this Monday morning?
Doing well, Monty. Thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow's another day, Monty. When I went to bed last night, I thought we'd be looking at 50 or 51 today, not 47. I didn't see another hit coming. So I wasn't happy when I saw that this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always tough to, wake up to that red candle. I think part of it might have to do with, some weakness we're seeing in traditional equity markets. What's your outlook, for this week, John, in the traditional equity markets? Because right now it's kind of looking like we're struggling to make new highs here.
Yeah, well, the stock market seemed to shrug off the bad news of that inflation last week, and I thought that bad news of that inflation would be good news for those of us holding crypto. And we did see a recovery, but like I said, that kind of vanished fairly quickly. A lot of the stocks that I'm looking at right now, I'm seeing the VIX move up by about 10% today, guys. Not huge, 10% move these days isn't exactly a huge move, but it brings us back to about 20 and a half. I would have liked to have seen HUT and a bunch of our crypto stocks. I sort of thought last night that this would have been a good morning for them, and instead, it's another day when they kind of slide back down. So overall, I'm not terribly happy.
How about you, CJ? I know over the weekend you spent a lot of time in the community looking at some alts, even published trade insight that we'll talk about during our Doge of the day later today. But how about you? Any thoughts on this week's market as we kick off Monday today?
Yeah, well, I'd like to share an article. Just kind of breaks down 3 reasons in ETH why we might be seeing a little bit of bearish price action, but I think it's kind of applicable to the collective market as well. Just to look at Ethereum solely to start off, this author mentions a couple technical patterns. For instance, rising wedge in Ethereum could be somewhat bearish if we break to the downside and that continues. Also, when you look at the RSI, you see a bearish divergence within the upward momentum, meaning that the upward momentum is decreasing and bullish momentum is just slowing. But I think more importantly is what we have coming out of the Fed or the central banks. Essentially tomorrow, there's going to be meetings with 20 central banks, and ultimately we will see if they discuss how quickly they need to taper the $120 billion a month asset purchasing program. That could definitely have an impact not only on traditional markets, but I think crypto as well. And so I think a lot of eyes are focused on that particular meeting tomorrow.
How about you, John? Any thoughts on how that meeting might go? What those possible outcomes could mean for both the traditional equity market and the crypto market?
You've got Mohammed El-Arian out there, CJ, talking about that this is the worst. The transitory was the worst call by the Fed ever on inflation. And he thinks it's going a lot higher. And right now, the market doesn't seem scared off by that. The market seems to be thinking that if assets inflate, assets like stocks could continue to do very well. I think part of the reason for some of the, not so much fear, but some of the, I don't want to use trepidation, but the, lack of commitment here is that people are really wondering what Europe is going to do. I mean, Great Britain's looking at locking down, possibly. A number of other places, New York instituted mask mandates, even indoors, or indoors if you didn't have a vaccine And right now it's 2 vaccines. They haven't said whether or not they'd make you get the third or not. And just boots on the ground. I got a booster a week ago, guys. No issues whatsoever. Got it on a Saturday. Didn't feel a thing, for days and days. But my wife and daughter both got the same booster a couple days later, and they were knocked out for like 2 days. So, it's things like that are keeping, I think, some people from feeling as comfortable about going and getting a booster and going back to offices and things like that. I saw today Goldman just pulled back on more or less their mandate in London to send people back to the offices. So I think all that sort of weighs on things as much as the Fed itself this week, Monty.
Yeah, John, I completely agree. And, it feels like COVID's really creeping back into the public consciousness to an extent that we haven't seen, in quite a while. Another kind of, anecdotal piece of evidence that I've noticed recently is, professional sports teams and their COVID protocols. So many teams have been seeing spikes in the number of COVID cases and players entering COVID protocol. Many of you know I'm a big Bulls fan. They've been hit hard by COVID and, have even had to result to signing new players. And it's not just here in the United States, also, overseas. English Premier League club Manchester United also had, a number of players test positive for COVID this week. So I think there is a little bit of fear surrounding that's kind of creeping back into the market. So, I agree with you there, John. One thing I did want to mention, getting back to Bitcoin real quick, is something that we talked about last week and something that I think is, really important in this current market, and that is Bitcoin dominance. As we've seen, this 40% level has been a highly critical level, and essentially when we retest it, it's telling us that the market is, kind of entering this kind of area of risk off attitude. And when we hit these levels, we typically see Bitcoin rebound, and that results in the alts being hit harder with, profit taking than what we see with Bitcoin. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities between, what we're seeing here and what we saw at the beginning of September. At the beginning of September, if we just look at Bitcoin's chart, we saw a strong amount of liquidations that really kicked off the month here, comparable to what we saw last Friday with these, 25% of the futures open interest being liquidated in about 15 minutes. We saw something comparable here, back in September. And as a result, we consolidated. We actually did see another liquidation event, but ultimately the catalyst for upside price action was ultimately a short squeeze. But getting back to Bitcoin dominance, as you can see here, we've just started the rebound from this critical level. Last time in September, really, in order for the rest of the market to continue to run and for assets like AVAX, Sol, even ETH to make new all-time highs, a lot of that confidence came on the back of positive Bitcoin price action. So now that we've gotten this bounce from this critical level of 40%, the next big hurdle is going to be a break above the critical moving average at 42%. As you can see in September, we came up, retested this level, got rejected, consolidated a bit, and promptly, once that short squeeze hit, we rocketed up. That brought confidence back into the market, and ultimately, positive price action continued, as you can see here. I think we are in a comparable situation here. We could potentially see some consolidation during this month as people continue to take profits in alts. CJ, you talked about some, bearish metrics for ETH. I think looking at ETH dominance as well kind of paints a picture that it is overbought relative to the rest of the market. We climbed all the way up to 22%. And if you compare, the year over year numbers for ETH versus Bitcoin, ETH really outperformed Bitcoin, almost up 600%, whereas Bitcoin's only up 200%. I think, given what we've seen historically in terms of this flow of capital, it does look like ETH is ready to kind of give some back to the market and kind of that capital flow back into Bitcoin. That could be a contributor to this spike up in Bitcoin dominance that typically precedes, a return of market strength. So ultimately, I think we're in a bit of a precarious situation here for Bitcoin. I think we could see some consolidation here. I'll talk a little bit more about some on-chain factors during our members-only Doge of the Day. But for the most part, I think a lot of it's going to come down to what we see in the traditional equity markets, what we get out of the Fed tomorrow, and more or less how we continue to see COVID numbers evolve in the coming weeks here. So we'll be watching all those metrics closely, but just wanted to quickly bring that to your attention here.
Good stuff.
CJ, there's a question here from Bob, and I think it's a good one. I want to toss it to you. We've been in this crypto market for a while. We're a bit jaded when it comes to moves like this. Does this move over the last week feel any different than anything you've seen in the past in your dealings with the crypto market?
Not particularly. These periods of like painful sentiment have been very familiar throughout the years, especially after things get very highly inflated. People kind of just start wondering, all right, what is this stuff actually worth? And then we see these massive downfalls, and a lot of negative sentiment, is included in that. And I think what we're experiencing now is somewhat similar to the drop that we saw to 29K, where people thought we were going into a bear market. I think we're starting to see similar sentiment across the board as well. Even if you look at the fear and greed index, I don't need to pull it up for you guys to know, exactly where it's at. It's very common. But no, it doesn't feel different. In fact, it feels more reassuring compared to history, because there was a time when Bitcoin wasn't adopted or treated so favorably by institutions, and we didn't even know if it was going to be around. Bitcoin's not going anywhere. The genie is out of the bottle at this particular point. So this feels much more optimistic than historical instances of, being down after a 30 to 40% correction. So,
yeah, I would echo that completely. Back in the day, there was legitimate fear that Bitcoin could go to zero, that people could drive it to zero. Now, my biggest fear is that we retest 42K and consolidate there for a month. Obviously that is much less scary, and I think that ultimately that's just the nature of Bitcoin. We kind of bounce between fear and between greed, and it's not very often that we're in the middle, especially when you consider the halving cycle, where we're at now in the halving cycle. We're going to be bouncing between these levels of fear and greed. Whenever we get greedy, we tend to automatically shoot back towards that range of fear, and now we're in that range of fear. Typically this is an ideal time to accumulate before we head back up into those levels of greed. So ultimately, I don't feel anywhere near as much fear as I've felt during previous liquidations events. I think this is just another month for Bitcoin. Everyone was looking one direction, and when that happens, Bitcoin tends to move in the other direction. So for me, it's nothing different than what we've seen in the past, and I would agree with CJ that ultimately I'm reassured by the supply absorption that we've seen, even amidst this heavy sell pressure.
Very true. It's now the volume turnover here, guys, has not been extraordinary though. As far as when I look at the tracker here, even though we've given up whatever almost 800 million or 800 billion rather dollars in market cap since Bitcoin and many of the altcoins made that serious rollover. The 24-hour volumes, what is it hanging here? 77 billion right now. We've seen bigger blowouts when people are more concerted with their selling pressure. I think this is just kind of a buyer's strike. People are waiting, just like you guys were saying, and they're looking at those technical levels and saying, well, why should I step in at 49 or 48 if I really think I might be able to get it at 47 too, or right around there?
Yeah, it does seem like that's the case. And I want to toss one last question to you both, and it's based on this article here. Or it's not really a question. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on this. We've been talking a lot about sentiment. One interesting way to look at Bitcoin sentiment, in my opinion, is looking at Bitcoin's hash rate. And just this morning or last night, actually, Bitcoin hash rate hit an all-time high, suggesting that thousands of next generation machines have joined the race. This comes just 6 months after we had that massive migration of miners from China as Bitcoin or as China banned Bitcoin mining. But yeah, CJ, John, any thoughts on this, or what this news might tell us?
Historically, hash rate has had a slight correlation with price, namely because miners used to be the predominant sellers of Bitcoin. But now, since there's only 10% of the Bitcoin supply remaining to be mined, miners are not going to have that market dominance or that market impact the way that they used to. Nevertheless, I think it is bullish because it means that we have security on the Bitcoin network. It's not vulnerable like it was when we had lower difficulty earlier during the China migration. Nonetheless, if you're trading Bitcoin mining stocks, I think it's important to recognize that the more the hash rate increases, the more you're going to have to look at how much hash rate the company that you're investing in actually has, because the higher that hash rate goes, the more difficult it's going to be, and the more competitive the mining landscape is going to become. So, for instance, I believe it was either Hut 8 or Riot, most likely both, though. Were not able to produce as many Bitcoins as they were, the quarter previously when all that hash rate had come off the network. So I just think that's something to be cognizant of if you're, have positions in any of the Bitcoin miners. But it's kind of an interesting relationship nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that profitability, before we started the show, John, you were talking about an individual you met down there in Puerto Rico who is operating their mining rigs. You want to just quickly share that?
Oh, no, it was one of our guys. I don't know if he wants me to use his name, so I won't. But one of the guys who paid for the live trading down there in Miami, with myself, Pete. Let's see, from our team, we had Wayne Razzie, we had Ryan. Let me see.
Bill Johnson.
Bill Johnson came in at the end of the day as well, and then Chris, Glenn, and Dirk. But one of the guys down there was a former restaurateur that has gotten into mining, and he runs about 40 rigs up in Pennsylvania. So gave us great insight into what it's like being a modern day miner. I know you guys did mining as well, but this guy's running 40 rigs and getting the new stuff. He just took delivery of some new S19s that he was just getting from China, and he was very much looking forward to getting those hooked up.
That's exciting stuff. And, I think that story anecdotally and also the hash rate rising overall tells us that, miners are bullish on the long-term outlook for Bitcoin. And ultimately they see right now as a time of possible accumulation. So very interesting mining metrics there. But we will end the show on that today. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be doing our members only Doge of the Day straight after this. So if you want to get a bit more in-depth analysis into Bitcoin as well as some picks of the day from myself and CJ, head over there and check that out. If you want access to that, as well as a whole lot more, you can check out markrebellion.com/try crypto, where we have a pro charting service, a 24/7 chat with a community of traders from all around the world. We publish actionable trade insights with entries, exits, stop losses. One was actually published by CJ just yesterday, so I'm sure he'll have something to say about that on our Doge of the Day. But yeah, got an education curriculum, a whole lot more. We highly encourage you guys head over there and check that out. And as always, thank you to Voyager for sponsoring this show today. If you guys want to check out a brokerage where you can hold crypto assets and earn up to 12% interest on assets like that, we recommend you head over to investvoyager.com. And if you do, use code REBEL25 when you sign up. But I think that's all we got for today. Any parting words for our audience before we sign off here, gents?
Just pay attention to the nickname. Tomorrow's another day. So whether you're in the Dow, in equities, or whether you're in crypto, I think we're going to work our way through getting to the Fed and exactly how fast they're going to taper and what their outlook is, because they'll give us a little more insight into that.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.